Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR 96.3 HD2 and Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight on the Daily Drum, it has happened again. 9 weeks after an assassin's bullet grazed Donald Trump, there's been another assassination attempt on the life of the former president and Republican presidential nominee. This time, the suspected gunman was captured, and by all accounts, the quick action of a Secret Service agent prevented what could have been a deadly outcome. What do we know about the gunman, and why did he target Donald Trump, allegedly? How will the latest political violence shape the remainder of the race for the White House? We only have 50 days left before November 5th, Election Day. Plus, we're also going to delve into Trump's controversial comments about the Haitian community in Springfield, Ohio, and why they are now living in fear. My guests are Dr. Joanna LeBlanc. She's a national security law and foreign policy expert, and Dr. Tyrone Powers, a former FBI agent. Thank you both for joining this really important conversation. So much to get to. Let me first start with what we do know. The suspected gunman, 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Ruth, he is said to have a long criminal record, and authorities say he was hiding in the bushes waiting to ambush Trump when a Secret Service agent spotted him and opened fire. One of the big questions has been, how did the gunman know that the former president was going to be at the golf course that day and that time? Dr. Powers, your thoughts about how all of this came together yesterday?
Yeah, a couple of things, and thank you for having me on again. I always enjoy being with you. And
thank you so much.
Couple of things. The first assassination attempt. Former President Trump is a very difficult person to protect. First, because of the outside rallies. We've learned since the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, who had the convertible car, who was outside. Since that time, Secret Service had tried to instruct their assets, whether it be the president, the vice president, or some other official, or someone visiting the United States, to not expose themselves. And outside is always more difficult to protect an asset than inside. And so they've already made the plea to former President Trump not to do outside events and outside activities. If you do them inside, they could take care of them better. But you cannot enforce that. You just have to ask them. So a difficult scenario is to have any kind of outside event. The first assassination attempt, and this one on the golf course. Secondly, while Trump doesn't publish his schedule because he is not the president of the United States, usually the president of the United States, many people know their schedule. Technically, it's still supposed to be kept relatively close to the vest, but many people know their schedule. There are individuals who, after the first assassination attempt, seeing the attention that was gotten at that attempt, would like the publicity of a second attempt. When I was in the FBI, we looked at a couple of things. We know we had people who specifically targeted politicians. We had the copycat people. We had the people who did it for publicity and notoriety, and you couldn't pigeonhole any one of them. So you had to develop protection strategies to deal with all those scenarios. The thing I will say is that in this particular case, with Trump being outside, with us having what we call force multipliers like technology, in terms of drones, that you would think that the Secret Service would have them in place at this particular time because of the first assassination attempt. I know that he's not the president, so you don't get the same level of protection when you're a former president as you do when you are president. But being that he was the target of an initial assassination attempt, that same kind of protection as if he was the president should have been put in place.
Dr. LeBlanc, you're nodding your head. Your thoughts?
I think this second assassination attempt exposes a number of things, right? I think one, it exposes that America's democracy is truly being tested right now, and that we are indeed living in unprecedented times. And also, I think it also exposes that both President Trump and former President Trump and Vice President Harris need heightened security. As you noted, this is again the second assassination attempt, and you're looking at this from a global perspective. The rest of the world is watching America, right? Is watching America for leadership when it comes to elections, when it comes to security matters. But yet, our very own candidates, irrespective of your position as it relates to Mr. Trump, his politics, but America's very own candidate is not safe in this country. So it appears to be some level of political instability in this country, and also security matters, right? So again, from a global perspective, this is not the message that the rest of the world, that America would like to send to the rest of the world. It does not look good for our nation. It makes our security infrastructures look weak. So again, I think that VP Harris has also received death threats. So again, security needs to be heightened. But it also exposes the issue around gun control in this country. We have a major issue around anyone can have access to guns in this country because of relaxed laws across America, and it needs to be addressed. Far too many Americans have died because of gun violence. But I also like to talk about the issue around mental health, because I think that you cannot talk about gun violence without talking about mental health. Yes, there needs to be restrictive laws, right? But at the same token, I don't believe that guns kill people. It's people that kill people by the use of guns. So we need to ensure that we have enough resources to ensure that Americans have access to mental health institutions and mental health services across this country. And lastly, I think it really exposes the issue of domestic terrorism. This was not done by someone from Iran, from somewhere in the Middle East, or some migrant who crossed our border, like Mr. Trump always say, illegally to come here to commit crimes, right? It was done by, the first one was done by an American, and the second one done by an American, and to be precise, white Americans. And as we know, the Department of Homeland Security and DOJ had rolled out a national a domestic terrorism plan back in 2021, because they've realized that it is indeed a problem, and that we need to have enough resources to address domestic terrorism, not just international terrorism.
You know, you make so many great points, and before I go back to Dr. Powers, one of the things that you kind of touched on when you're talking about looking at this from a big perspective is that the reporting has been that this particular suspect had voted for Donald Trump in 2016. He was a supporter of the former president in 2016, but changed his mind because of the former president's position on Ukraine. And certainly for those of us on the inside, many Americans often are focused on what's happening here. But do you think, Dr. LeBlanc, that someone who is concerned about bigger international issues, particularly Ukraine, which is always in the headlines, is he an outlier, or do you think that this is something that really needs to be paid attention to?
I think that the issue, the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, is not an issue that the average American really care about. What the average American care about is the amount of dollars that are being used to support Ukraine. And Americans are saying that, hey, we have domestic issues here. We have a student debt crisis. We have a homelessness crisis. We have a number of issues here in this country that need to be addressed. Why are we sending all of our so much of our financial resources to a country that most Americans probably can't really identify with? So I think from that perspective, it's not more so that Americans care about what's happening in Ukraine, because again, there are some dire issues happening here in this country that must be addressed and that need to be addressed. So I think in that regard, he might be an outlier. But again, when Americans think about Ukraine, it's more so about resources that are being used to fund the conflict versus those resources that could be used in our neighborhoods here in America.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Powers. We know that a Secret Service agent was able to prevent this from becoming a much worse situation on yesterday. After the first assassination attempt in Pennsylvania, what is the mindset for Secret Service FBI? Do they begin to look more intensely, or, and this is coming from a layman, so forgive me, or do we think, yeah, it happened once, it's not going to happen again?
Well, technically, first of all, this is not unprecedented. Obviously, we've had the assassination of presidents before. Remember, President Kennedy was told that people were so hostile in Texas that he shouldn't even go there. The Secret Service advised him not to go there, even though there was a whole nother group of people who were saying, we want you to come here. And then it was the Johnson. So Kennedy went into the same kind of volatile political situation that we're discussing today with Donald Trump and where we are today. I think a lot of times we see these things as we don't, historically, we've been here before. Ronald Reagan was shot coming outside of a hotel by John Hinckley in an outside environment, in an era where he was celebrated by Republicans, but not so much by Democrats. So that was another hostile era. And here was a guy with a mental health issue who shot him. So the Secret Service didn't need the first assassination attempt to understand the history of what happens in political environments. We've had, again, like I said, with the Kennedy assassination, we had political environments with this before. In that case, have been studied back and forth. We still have theories about that. There've been movies made about that, and so on and so forth. So the Secret Service should already be in a heightened state, especially not only because of the international issues in the Ukraine, what's happening with Israel and Palestine, what's happening in South America and Venezuela, what's happening in other places around the world. So they have enough incentive to have heightened security on all candidates or all assets. Also, again, I will say again, because of what happened with Kennedy outside, what happened with Reagan outside, what happened with the first assassination attempt on former President Trump outside, and this being an outside event, the Secret Service have enough history to understand it is extremely difficult. Beyond that, if you look at the assassinations of leaders around the world, most of them were outside, whether it's Anwar Sadat or other leaders from around the world, they were outside giving presentations. So the FBI, the Secret Service, and all the other agencies understand that it is extremely difficult to protect an asset when they're outside as opposed to inside. President Barack Obama had probably more threats on his life than anyone else, but President Barack Obama followed Secret Service recommendations, and he held few outside rallies. And when he did, there was bulletproof vests and bulletproof shields. The very suit that he wore was bullet resistant. So he followed them to a T. Former President Trump is hard because he doesn't listen, he doesn't pay attention, and against policy of the Secret Service, he does things. If you remember the first assassination attempt, he even tried to stand up and get his head up. Protocol, and they train presidents and assets on this, is to keep your head down, keep covered. He was trying to put his fists up. He was trying to stay, because they said there may be a second shooter. He doesn't follow protocol. So he's an extremely difficult situation for the Secret Service to protect. And they will say again to him, can you please limit outside event, outside rallies? Inside, we have you protected. We can protect you to an extent. The reality of the matter is, if anyone want to assassinate a president of the United States and they're willing to lose their own life, they have an opportunity to get that done. But outside, the chance is enhanced. So whatever the Secret Service, and when they do this investigation, as they continue this investigation with the FBI and the other agencies, because it's a long-term investigation, I think they will constantly say we have to double and triple our asset, our technological force multipliers like drones when we're outside as opposed to inside. Believe it or not, Harold, we have decided to have Super Bowls in dome stadiums because they're easier to protect. We've learned the lesson.
Hold it, Dr. Powers, hold that point. I've got to take a really quick break. The Quiet Storm is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drama on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about an apparent second assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. We continue with our guests, Dr. Joanna LeBlanc, national security law and foreign policy expert, and Dr. Tyrone Powers, former FBI agent. Dr. Powers, before we took the break, you were talking about dome stadiums and protecting the president. Please finish your point.
Yeah, we've learned that from an international standpoint. You won't see Vladimir Putin in Russia giving too many outside speeches. If you follow that historically, he understands. He was head of the KGB, which was their former secret service. So he understands how difficult that proposition is. Again, you didn't see that with Barack Obama. He did it occasionally. But Trump doesn't listen. To be quite frank with you, former President Trump does what he wants to do, and he anticipates and expects that those around him will provide him whatever protection and assistance that he needs. So he's hard to protect. Again, and you can't profile a certain type of assassin because we've had those seeking attention. Hinckley shot the president to impress Jodie Foster. You can't predict that kind of behavior as he came out of a hotel room. He wasn't political one way or the other. Kennedy was shot in Dallas. We think we know who did it, but we're still looking at the political environment that he was in. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. We've had assassinations attempts on Harold Ford by a member who was part of Charles Manson's gang. After he was arrested, Squeaky Fromme tried to shoot him, took 2 shots at him from across the street in an open area when he exited a building. So we've had enough examples for the Secret Service and the agencies to be better at protection, and we just haven't got there yet. And even international agencies who have similar organizations like the Secret Service have told their targets to stay within the building rather than outside the building. So it'll be interesting with how they disperse the blame in this particular case, since they just lost a former Secret Service director and they have an acting one now, and what they do to really change things permanently. So we're not revisiting this again, because we always talk about the October surprise.
Yeah.
And it's still September.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Dr. Powers just talked about, the political climate, Dr. LeBlanc, and I think this is really kind of right up your alley for various and sundry reasons. This political rhetoric about Haitians eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. And I said this last week, and I think it goes, I should mention this again for those who have never been to Springfield, Ohio. I have been there. Springfield, Ohio is about the size of the incorporated city of Bowie, Maryland. There are only about 57,000 people in Springfield. So it is a small to medium-sized town, and even at 57,000, and everybody kind of knows each other, it's a close-knit place, et cetera, et cetera. But from your perspective, Dr. LeBlanc, what impact do you believe that these stories and the rhetoric has on not only the Haitian community there, people living in fear, but also more broadly, what does it do to the political climate?
Well, first and foremost, the comment was initially made by Senator J.D. Vance.
Right.
And Mr. Trump decided to utilize his time during the debate to further amplify that comment, which I don't think was a good use of his time, considering that I think that this election is going to be neck and neck. Mr. Trump could have used his time to really focus more on some of the policy issues that Americans care about, like the economy, the inflation, the housing crisis here in this country and so on. But instead, he used his time to make a comment that was, quite frankly, repulsive, divisive, and very dangerous for Haitians, not just in Ohio, but immigrants all across America, right? I think that it was a comment that was made to dehumanize Haitians here in this country, which is rather unfortunate considering the contribution of Haitian Americans here in this country. When you talk about the Louisiana Purchase, but for Haitians, that wouldn't have happened, right? When you think about what the country of Haiti stands for as the first Black country in this country, in the world rather, which gained its independence in 1804 through a bloody revolution with France. And the Haitian Revolution was not just about Haitians liberating themselves from the oppression and suppression of France. It was also about liberating Black folks from all over the world. In fact, a year after the country gained its independence, it amended its constitution to make it such that anyone who is Black who were to step foot on Haiti's soil will be considered free. A white man could not own land in Haiti nor be a slave master. So in essence, those sort of laws severely undermine the notion of white supremacy and obviously sparked a movement here in America as enslaved people learned about free Black people in Haiti, wanted to revolt. So that's kind of just a small bit of history about who the Haitian people are and what we stand for. And here in America, you have more than 2 million Haitian Americans, roughly 2 million Haitian Americans living in this country who have the power to vote. In places like Florida, for example, have the ability to even change the outcome of the presidential election through their votes because the number is so significant in the state of Florida. And Haitians across America are quite frankly disgusted by Donald Trump's comments. And it will hurt him in the ballot box. And I know many Haitians who are Republicans, and after the comment that was made by Mr. Trump, they are now reconsidering voting for either VP Harris or just no candidate at all. So I think that it's an opportunity for Vice President Harris' team to kind of like tap into that demographic to explain more of her policy position of how it would help this particular demographic address some of the dire issues, not just domestic issues, but also some of the foreign policy issues as it relates to the instability in Haiti, the Kenyan-led mission, and helping to restore how the U.S. will work with the Haitian government to help restore democracy in the country and help restore security in the country and ultimately the country.
But Dr. LeBlanc, if I may, forgive me. The thing that I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that for the Haitian Americans who are here, the migrants that are in Springfield, do you believe that this rhetoric is impacting the immediate health and welfare threat of the people today? And do you believe that these comments by Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance and by extension former President Trump, is it possible that continuing to bring up these frankly ludicrous comments is a smokescreen to divert or distract from the bigger issues that should be addressed in this election cycle?
Well, first, I'd like to address your question about the health and well-being of Haitians. In Springfield, Ohio, a number of events had to be canceled because of the Haitian community receiving a number of death threats. In fact, the Ku Klux Klan put out posters across, different places in Ohio, in Springfield rather, asking Haitians and all immigrants to leave, right? And we have to be, and I have to look at this issue from an objective perspective. While I do understand that, the influx of Haitian migrants into the country have really placed a strain on the country, on the cities, on the states and cities' resources, But I think there are better ways to address it. And we also have to understand how the Haitians got there to begin with. They are there, they're working. These are not people who are looking for handouts. They are contributing to the economy in Springfield and in the state at large. So I think the comment made by J.D. Vance, from an international perspective, it diminishes the credibility of the U.S. Senate because he made a comment a few days ago during an interview alluding that what he said may not have even been true. It was as a way to grab the attention of the American people of what's happening in cities across America. And that is very disturbing because America, the United States Senate, put out resolutions, put out legislation. They take actions that have significant impact on lives in countries all across the world. And to have a sitting senator who could have potentially been lying about something of this magnitude is alarming, and it really puts America's global standing in question by the rest of the world. But another thing I think it's important to note is that I do think that this is going to have an impact on the electorates in places like Georgia, in places like Florida. If the Harris campaign has a strategy to really address this community, because I know that in the past, the state campaign historically had about a $20 million budget, but this year the budget has been reduced to about about 3 million perhaps, and that is a problem, right? I think that the campaign needs to take this seriously, and they need to seize the opportunity to really make sure that those constituents within the Haitian community find a place. The ones who are committed to voting for Trump find a place within the Democratic Party.
Dr. Powers, I want to go back to protection because one of the other issues that has come up over the past 24 hours is, and this isn't just about Donald Trump. This is about protecting executives, high-ranking government executives, and let's talk about the Vice President Kamala Harris, especially in the wake of a now deleted posting on X where Elon Musk said, quote, "and no one is even trying to assassinate Biden, Kamala." We've got the rhetoric on one hand, but then we have the facts, Dr. Powers, that, and you know better than I do, that executive protection of government officials is complex, but it is also extremely expensive. You know, how number one, do you believe that the incident regarding Donald Trump yesterday could impact protection for Kamala Harris? And secondly, who's going to pay for all of the upgrades that obviously are going to need to happen?
Yeah, that's not an issue. To me, the finances is not an issue because there's all kind of secret budgets. We have a secret budget in the FBI and the Central Intelligence Agency. As you can see, we're sending millions, billions to Israel, to Ukraine. So the protection, the finances of protection has never been an issue. I've never, during my entire time in the FBI, and even during the time when we worked and investigated or did the pre-investigation for presidents traveling one place or the other. Not any time have I ever gone into a meeting where they've asked us about limiting our resources or had us reduce our ask because of limited resources. That has never been an issue. This country will do whatever it has to do or has the wherewithal to do it, whatever do without budget issues to increase and enhance security. It is about having the right people in place that know how to do that. Again, we have lost a head of the Secret Service because of the first assassination attempt, because we do have drone technology. We do have AI technology. We do have other technology that could enhance the protection of these individuals. It's just the wherewithal and the willingness to do it, and having the people in these positions to say, this is how we're going to do this, and to learn from that particular history, which is taught in the academies. I know when I was in the FBI Academy, we were taught these historic events so that we could see what the vulnerabilities are. And you can make it very colloquial from this standpoint. When a football team or a basketball team identify weaknesses in an opponent or in an area, they immediately go about the business of drafting, enhancing, or replacing those assets to increase their ability to be effective. And it's the same thing with the intelligence agencies. I think the Secret Service will probably talk about those issues of finances that you're talking about. But in reality, that's just a matter of playing the blame game. They just didn't have the proper things in place. You could have easily flown a drone. Remember, this is a golf course, but this is Trump's area. You can easily, so there's no reasonable expectation of privacy or no privacy issues. You could have easily had a drone flying over the entire area. I know there's woods around it, there's the fence line and so on and so forth, but there are things you could have put in place, which I think they will put in place going into the future, and we should have had in place based on the past. So that won't be an excuse whatsoever. To the security of the threat that you talked about with the people in Springfield, the Haitians and all. Listen, to be quite frank with you, we have a history in this country of denigrating Black people, and Black people have had to go on in spite of it. I hate the fact that they canceled events. I think they should have enhanced security. I think we should have had entities go out there and help them enhance security, because the Klan have always used these kind of threats, and sometimes they've carried them out. But at the same time, we have to demonstrate that despite the racism and the racist comments and the denigration, that we're not going to not go ahead with our events. Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, Democratic nominee, Barack Obama, all of them have been completely briefed on the greater threat to candidates of color than other candidates. Beyond the fact that they're Democrat or Republican, along with the other things we talk about, the mental health, the mental illness issues, the copycat issues, people just seeking publicity. If I assassinated president, again, John Hinckley was going to kill Ronald Reagan so that he could impress Jodie Foster. There's no politics in that. We are aware of those individuals being out there. And once there is an assassination attempt, there is likely to be another one, and it may not be directed towards party, but it may be directed towards publicity. Now, I want to be that person. If I can't be famous, then I like to be infamous. The agencies know that. So security should have already been enhanced, whether it was in Springfield, the people there should have enhanced it or got outside help rather than canceling events, because that gives the momentum and it gives the people who threaten them, who denigrate them, whether it's the Klan or anyone else, exactly what they want, rather than saying we're going to continue with our life despite the denigration there, or whether it's with President Trump. Former President Trump said something that I can't disagree with. He said, I'm going to continue this no matter what, which should have been the same attitude of the people in Springfield, despite the denigration, despite the racism that they have to continue. And again, the Secret Service will play the blame game. But in reality, we have enough history in this kind of political environment. This is not new. This political environment, like I said, Kennedy thrived in this. People said he stole the election from Nixon. It was the same kind of rhetoric about who stole the election, that people in Chicago and Illinois was voting, said vote early and vote often, taking names off the cemetery, all kind of accusations about falsification of the election process. It was the same type of environment in which he was assassinated in as he was on the way to his second term. Same thing with Robert Kennedy, who was assassinated, who walked through the kitchen, who was redirected from the secure path that the Secret Service had for him by his own people who wanted to take a shortcut. Same kind of mistakes made in the past, whether candidates listen or don't listen, or the kind of protection and examples that we have in place. We shouldn't be failing at this point, and there's really no excuse for it, except that either we haven't learned from the history or we have the wrong people in positions in these security agencies that do not at least mitigate the threat, which wasn't the case with former President Donald Trump, no matter what excuse we hear.
Dr. LeBlanc, moving forward, what do you believe, what is your biggest concern, no matter who becomes president, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? What is your biggest concern about safety? And I would also say the international optics of this. Are Americans, are they shocked and clutching their pearls and saying, "Oh my God, the world is a really, really dangerous place now"? And people outside this country are saying, "I told you so." Or what are your thoughts about the optics of where we are right now internationally?
The optics of, 'cause, it's a good question you asked me. I've been doing TV interviews. Most of my television interviews are international, more of your international girl than your domestic girl. But what's interesting is that the questions that I get asked about, again, our political system here in America, because again, the rest of the world is looking to America. America, as a superpower, set the standard for elections, for human rights, for a host of all different facets of life. But the question is now, does America have the moral authority to continue to lead the world when it comes to those issues? Because we've seen the United States' own failure in those various areas. We want to impose sanctions on countries for human rights violations, but America's engaged in human rights violations domestically and internationally, right? So America, needs new leadership. America needs a new strategy in terms of how it's going to present itself to the world. One of the things that U.S. has done really, really good is branding this country. Until Mr. Trump came to power, I think a lot of the values that America appeared to hold on paper were kind of exposed to the reality that perhaps America may not necessarily hold those ideals, right? So a lot were exposed under the president, under Mr. Trump, how he withdrew from NATO, which caused a lot of concerns. But the reality is that when it comes to America putting America first, that's always been America's policy, though, right? Because when it comes to foreign policy, it's national interest before anything else, irrespective of who you have in office, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. National interest comes first. Now, how we get to national interest is different depending on who's in office, right? But that's always been the case. But people all over the world are really concerned, and I think it emboldened certain politicians around the world to take certain actions because of what they have seen in America. Because it's a bit harder to have to help maintain global order when your own house is in a way under fire.
Dr. Powers, what do you believe needs to be heard from political leaders? As I said earlier, President Biden said there is no place, I should say, for political violence. He said, we solve our problems at the ballot box and not with the muzzle of a gun. Obviously, those kinds of comments, we would hope that all leaders would make them. They don't hurt, but do they help? Or do you believe that people are just so entrenched and so embedded, including the outliers, that it may not make much of a difference?
No, well, I think that has to be the message, and you can't really measure the impact or worry about the impact. That has to be the message from every leader, every politician, whether they're in a political office or whether they're the head of a religious institute or a church or a synagogue or a mosque or any organization. The impact, I just don't know what effect that would have. I mean, reality of the matter, the United States of America came into existence through guns, through the Revolutionary War. And the reality of the matter is that, but you have to say that, because you have to say we're not going to change the ideas. This is not how we handle that. That's why we have an election. And in fact, It's what we said after the January 6th operation, that we don't do this by violence. We have a peaceful transfer of power. You have to continue to say that over and over again. So I think the message from President Biden, and for any other political leader or anyone in a position of power, should say that we should not do this via violence. We should do this a different way. And I think you don't make that presentation. You don't have that. You don't say that because you think it will change, or it may or may not change the outcome of any particular situation, but it is the right message. And sometimes you do, as Dr. King said, the time is always right to do right or to say right, or as Malcolm X said, wrong is wrong no matter who does it and who says it. So in the midst of the movements that they were involved in, the message still was the same. We need to get this done. We need to get this done the right way. Whether it'll have an impact, we'll have to see. Again, this is not really a new thing. Historically, this is not we've talked about this before with other situations, with the juvenile justice issue and the crime issues, the drive-by shootings that we had during the 1930s are now a thing of this generation, and we act like it didn't happen before. So we don't go back and look at what the solutions they came up with to mitigate the same problems. The assassination attempts that we're talking about today, we've had assassination attempts and actual assassinations, not only here, but around the world. And as the world, we've had presidents, again, who said the same thing or worse things than Donald Trump. I mean, President Truman said, I think all Americans are fine as long as you're not a Chinaman or a nigger. He said that from the White House. Dwight D. Eisenhower said that, I think I'm in favor of Brown versus the Board of Education, but white children shouldn't have to sit next to big out of control black children. That was the president of the United States. Trump is not unique. What Trump has done, though, is looked at this history and said, this is what had moved people to vote who I want to vote. It was Adolf Hitler who said, first, we're going to make Germany great again after World War I that led to World War II. Even the statement, make America great again, is not a Trumpism. It's a statement by Adolf Hitler who said, we're going to make Germany. And then Trump saw how this 5'4" individual amassed a country that took a world war that killed 80 million people, and how powerful his statement was. So we've been through this before. We have to learn the lessons of this. And they have to, getting back to your original question, the messaging is right. President Biden was right. Every politician needs to say that and not really worry about whether it's going to be effective or ineffective. It's the right message for the right time and the place that we're in.
Dr. LeBlanc, I have 30 seconds, and I'll let you have the final word. Tough question. What does healing from this time look like as we head toward November 5th? 30 seconds, your thoughts.
I think our leaders need to keep calling for peace. Our leaders need to keep calling for people to work together in respective of our political differences. I think this nation needs a great deal of healing. It's very concerning where we are as a society.
Yeah.
We need to unite more than ever before, because the reality is that united we will win, but divided we will fall.
Yeah. Dr. Joanna LeBlanc, Dr. Tyrone Powers, thank you both for participating in this important conversation. We are here yet again. We certainly will continue to watch the situation and to be vigilant. Thank you both so very, very much.
Thank you, Harold.
That is the Daily Drum for this Monday, September 16th. I'm Harold Fisher.